All right, Monday Fun Day here on the College Basketball Tip-Off Show powered by WagerTalk.com. Just a couple of weeks remain in the regular season before we start getting ready for conference championships. And then, of course, the month that is known as Madness will be here before we know it. But a lot still to be decided. Maybe not up at the top of the leaderboard when it's all said and done. We saw UConn cement itself over the weekend as, once again, the best team across the land. We've got another team trying to stake claim to that tonight in a huge, huge game in the Big 12 there with the Houston Cougars. We're going to talk about that game and, of course, a couple of other interesting matchups here tonight. Not the biggest of cards, but we certainly have three of the best here at Wager Talk to navigate your way through this limited card here as we welcome in Drew Martin in the house, ready to roll here, as is Adam Trigger. Look at the sweatshirt. That's a pretty good hint. And Mr. Rob Vino, ready to roll here today, guys, on the small card. But really, you got to love the main board card. Just 3 games. Got to love each of those. And then a whole lot of mid-major action going on here on the extra board tonight. But like we do every Monday, we kind of like to take a look back here from what was another crazy weekend in college basketball, where what is up is down, what is left, what is right. What did we learn from this weekend here in college hoops? And we've done a great job with this over the last couple of months, kind of signaling and pointing folks in the right direction here on some of the things that that you should know about and how you should approach some of these games, Drew. And no different this weekend here. I think, again, it was, especially in the SEC, a very interesting weekend. What was something that you pulled away when it was all said and done?
Yeah, you bring up the SEC, Joe. It's a great, in my opinion, it's a really good basketball conference. I mean, one of the best out there. I would throw it out up there with, the Big 12 conference, maybe. These two conferences are going to get a bunch of teams into the tournament, in my opinion, and some teams I'd actually probably look to bet on come March. One thing I wanted to throw out there for this segment, which I agree with you, it's really cool to hear sports bettors' kind of opinion on what's going on in the college basketball betting markets, the betting markets overall. And one thing that I've really noticed, particularly this year, for some reason, the Saturday cards, we're getting 150 plus games, guys. And I always remember in years past, Joe, the odds for Saturdays, because I would try to get all my work in on Friday and then, be able to kind of like relax a little bit. And it used to come out at like maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock Eastern, kind of like a normal weekday. And I'm talking about come out, meaning like the betting markets, the sports books kind of putting out the odds for the Saturday betting card. Now, Joe, like this past Friday, it was like 7:30 Eastern PM on Friday night. Yep. And there's no way to bet the games on Saturday yet. And it's telling me that these sports books are kind of hesitating. And then sure enough, we get a key offshore coming out and it's like 250 max, they're kind of just, pumping the brakes. They're not wanting to take a whole lot of risk on this Saturday card because they know a lot can fall through the cracks. So I guess it just kind of brings me to what the books are scared of as a sports bettor. We need to go after and hammer, even if we got to wait later on Friday. So yeah, we're seeing a key offshore come out, and then the main kind of bigger sports books just kind of shading one way or another off of that. So it kind of makes their job easy. But it's interesting to see these sports books wait to put out lines on that huge Saturday card.
It's an interesting discussion, being proactive versus reactive to the market, right? Can you be the first one in, or are you better off waiting until the overreaction comes and then jumping into it, Trig? But he's right. It certainly does feel like it's getting later and later and later. We're waiting for these odds to come out and then waiting for the craziness to happen in there. And next thing you know, an hour later, you're like, how the hell did this line move 2.5 points? Like, you got to be kidding me. So it's been interesting this year in a lot of those aspects, because every time you think something is going left and ends up going right, just when you think you get a handle on a team, you're like, this is just ridiculous here. My goodness, I should have my head examined. What are you thinking here from this past weekend? I know you had a fantastic 150 game slate. I think you swept the board there. So what did you take away from this past weekend?
Yeah, Joe, I had a good day Saturday. I went 4-0. Gave one back yesterday, but I'm pretty happy with the weekend. I think, I mean, I don't know that this is actionable info or not, but I already kind of knew this, but I think other people learned that the Ivy League deserves two teams in the NCAA tournament this year, Joe. Look at the top of that Ivy.
Yep.
First of all, tremendous game. I hate that they put all these games on Saturday, but someone at ESPN had the wherewithal to put Yale Princeton on at 8 p.m. on ESPN2. That was a great decision. That was one of the
Yep.
best games in any conference on Saturday, and it didn't disappoint. Of course, Princeton got the win, handed Yale their first loss in conference. But man, look at the top of that Ivy. Cornell 8-1, Yale 8-1. Princeton 7-2, but they're 19-3. Princeton might be the best of the three teams. I mean,
Mhm.
in terms of like overall body of work, and they're currently in third. And then you've got the rest of the conference where like it looks like there's a huge. I mean, there is a huge drop off from Cornell to Yale to Princeton, but there are some decent teams that just can't get wins in that conference because it's only an 8-team league, and you've got Harvard 4-5. They can beat teams like Brown's put in a good effort here and there. Columbia is having like a huge resurgence from what they've been in the past couple of years, and they can't 13-9 overall, and they're stuck in this league with Cornell, Yale, Princeton. Bottom line is those three teams, Cornell, Princeton, Yale, are all NCAA tournament caliber teams. And I hope that the tournament committee doesn't mess this up this year. You can't
Mm.
put the Ivy's not going to get three, Joe, but with the caliber of that league and how good those teams are at the top, it'd be nice to see a conference like the Ivy get two. And who knows, maybe with these new NIT rules, where the NIT is going to take in some of these like average name schools now, at least it's built to do that. Maybe we'll get a two-bid Ivy or like a two-bid Missouri Valley with Indiana State out there, something like that. That's what I want to see. And I think this weekend we may have taken a step toward that with just some of the games that were highlighted.
I mean, 17 win team, Yale, and two 19 win teams with Princeton and Cornell, and only one for sure. You're starting to scratch your head here at this point in the season, going, "Wow, there's got to be a way we can get some of these teams and maybe these lesser conferences. They got to have a shot at something here. It can't just be one and done here." Rob Vino, big weekend for you as well here, my man. Boy, oh boy. Were you on Belmont? I saw Belmont this weekend, and I thought for sure Rob Vino has got to be somewhere all over this game. What did you pull away from this weekend slate? There were a lot of crazy matchups here this past weekend here in that 150 some odd game slate on Saturday alone.
Yeah, Joe, real quick, just to relate to my beloved Belmont Bruins, three straight now with Jacoby
Yeah.
Gillespie back, and not even close in any of those. So what a difference maker he is, and we'll see if Casey Alexander's team can get the job done. And inside that conference, how about Indiana State makes a top 25 and abruptly loses two games? And
Oh,
so
yes.
that MVC
Winnable games.
Yeah, it almost there was a time. Well, I would say last week probably would have thought that Arch Madness was a foregone conclusion. Indiana State now maybe not so
Yep.
much. Hey, listen, let's get to the real low hanging fruit, Joe. The committee puts out their rankings. Purdue's the number one overall seed for how long, Joe? Before Matt Painter blew
Jackpot.
that? Took him about
Jackpot.
I don't know, 12 hours. Matt Painter.
12
Um,
hours.
I think that we were talking about this Friday night on a show, and the song that they play and during the NCAA tournament, one shining moment. There's just never going to be one shining moment for Matt Painter, even though that team is really,
Mm-mm.
really good. I think yesterday, if you're tentative, you're not tentative anymore about South Florida. South Florida came out and did the job against
Woo!
FAU yesterday, and Amir Abdur-Rahim's team is really, really good. And I know they were racking up wins, and I don't know that the market really caught up to them because action came in really heavy right up until tip-off on the FAU side. But South Florida from start to finish, FAU made a run at them, but South Florida was certainly the better team there. I think I'll just go Triggs direction geographically here real quick. I watched a lot of Niagara over the weekend. And to me, Niagara looks like they could be the best team in that conference right now. Now, I don't know how true that is, but man, they looked really good this weekend. Quinnipiac missed a bunch of shots. It's a fast tempo team that doesn't necessarily shoot great, but they were the favorite in the game. I don't think Niagara ever really felt threatened the last 5 minutes. So just some things as we start to look to these lower conference teams. And I'll just close with this. I had been building kind of a case for Samford last week. And guess what happens on Saturday? Samford loses to Mercer. So these lower conference teams where our conference tournaments are going to be coming up in a couple of weeks, pay attention, guys. Things are changing.
Yeah, it's getting to be the point where maybe some of the cream is really starting to rise to the top here with like a South Florida. Maybe we got to stop questioning teams like that and just be like, yeah, they are this good. And they certainly were at home against FAU over the weekend. But we're going to learn a little something about that tonight, too, as we've got ourselves quite the matchup here of some big brands going at it here tonight, along with a lot of mid-majors. So we're going to dive into one of them right up at the top, Drew, and we're going to talk some Iowa State going on the road to take on Houston, the Cougars here in a payback mode as well. Let's not forget. Last month, we saw Iowa State hold serve on their home court in what was ultimately a total rock fight there. A lot of turnovers, very sloppy game, but one that Iowa State was able to handle. And now they got to go on the road, getting what, 9.5 here. It feels like a lot. There's still 2 top 10 teams going at it. Is one a fraud? Because that's the only way I think this makes any sense, this line.
Interesting, Joe. Yeah, I don't know if I'd use the term fraud. I would go with what you were talking about in terms of the line here. I think it's expensive on the Cougars. I mean, first off, big time matchup here in the Big 12 Conference on ESPN, 6:00 Pacific, guys. So prime time start here. And this is a possible NCAA tournament late round matchup here. This could have, national championship implications later in the season. But we are seeing 9. It was 9.5 in the overnights. Now it's 9, even some 8.5s starting to pop up. So we've seen some Cyclones money. And I agree with it, Joe. I mean, first off, we need to bring up, yes, Houston is at home. This is going to be a tough trip for Iowa State. But this is a team that's actually one of the few across college basketball playing good ball on the road. They're actually 4-0 against the spread their last 4 road games, winning 3 of them outright. And the profile here, you brought up rock fight in the first matchup. I don't think anything's going to change. I mean, this Houston team plays one of the slower tempo brands of basketball across the country. So I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of possessions. We bring in the fact we know Houston's defense is good. Iowa State's defense is rock solid as well. So 2 elite units on the defensive side, a slow pace projection game here. I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of possessions. So then it becomes, look at this number. Houston's going to have to win by double digits as we're recording right now. If you're wanting to cash this ticket on the Cougs, I don't think they get there, Joe. This just comes down to the price. That's what sports betting's about. The ultimate equalizer here, and getting +9 on Iowa State. I like it, Joe. Last thing here, free throws. Always a big part when it comes down, particularly in this price range, guys. And sure enough, Houston, that's where they struggle. 67% from the charity stripe on the season. And add on the fact, Joe, recently, which I like to look at from the charity stripe, they missed 10 free throws in their last game. That could come back to haunt them here. Give me Iowa State plus the 9, Joe.
Ooh, all right. Taking Iowa State. Ironically enough, the money coming into the over is strange as well here. So it'll be interesting to see where this thing finally lands. And it was 57-53, I believe, in Ames the first go around. And also, I think it was in the 120s where it closed, and it didn't sniff that total either. So big one there in the Big 12. How about the ACC here, Trig? Because There are a couple of Virginia fans I know that are screaming and yelling, going, "Are you got to be kidding me with this number here? 3.5 is what it was. Vatek at home, looking to handle business against Virginia. Threes now I'm starting to see. So, what gives here? You think Virginia Tech gets it done, holds serve here at home tonight?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I kind of wanted to play this one, Joe. But man, like I do disagree with the line move. And I spent a lot
Mm.
of the morning trying to figure out, why that might be. Is there a key injury for Virginia here? Because I mean, this opened some places at 1.5, went all the way to 3.5. Looks like it's going to probably trend back down toward 3, but that's a pretty substantial move. And I just disagree with it. Feels like it's the
Mm.
market sort of like doing what they do, right? This is like something that I feel like got legs as a narrative on gambling Twitter, where like everyone just bets the unranked home favorite against the ranked home dog now, and it did well early in the season, but I don't think there's that much to it. Like that was something that didn't do well last year. It has done better this year, but there's got to be more to a handicap than that. And so for like if I just can't get on board with the market moving because of that action, right? Like that move is too big. So while I don't really want to lay the 3.5 here, there is matchup reasons why I think Virginia Tech might be the right side. So
Mm.
the first one, Virginia Tech really struggles to defend the rim. That's something I've seen this team play twice in person this year. I saw them play against NC State and I saw them play against Duke. And it was really apparent against Duke. NC State's kind of a mess offensively at times, so they couldn't really, get to the rim, but Duke could. And Duke sort of blew open a game that probably shouldn't have been that big of a blowout just because you had like Young and Filipowski just kind of getting easy buckets at the rim. Because that's really where really Virginia Tech struggles to defend. I just don't know that Virginia can exploit that with the way they play because they play. So now, update, not that this should surprise anyone, but Virginia now is the slowest team in the country again. I know earlier this year they were up a few spots. They are back down to 362 out of 362 teams, right where Tony Bennett wants them. But when you play that slow and you live in the half court, it's a little bit tougher to get to the rim, right? Like if you go to the game that Virginia Tech played over the weekend against North Carolina, they get up and down. So they're going to be able to get down the court, get ahead of steam, get going to the rim. That's a little bit easier than doing it from the tempo at which Virginia likes to play. So that's one reason I would want to go against Virginia. Another reason is the home road splits. They're as
Mm.
drastic for Virginia as they are for any team in the country. There was a point in time where Virginia's offensive efficiency at home or on the road was like dead last. Okay, like huge stark contrast from what they are at home. That's evened out a little bit, but they're still a less efficient offensive team on the road. And Blacksburg's not an easy place to play. Virginia Tech's 11-2 at home this year for a reason. It's a great building. I was fortunate enough to go there earlier this year. Fantastic crowd, and it should be a great environment. It's not going to be an easy place for them to win. The third reason is, Hunter Couture was just coming back from injury in that first game. I believe he had missed the 2 games prior, and it took Virginia Tech too much time to get going in the game in Charlottesville.
Mm.
They dug themselves an early hole. I think they only had like 18 points at halftime, Joe. But they were much better in the second half, and they
Oh, that's
almost
right.
came back. They made a push. They almost came back.
Yep.
They ended up losing the game, but they did sort of figure out how they wanted to attack the pack line defense in the second half of that game. So I'm wondering if they can make adjustments to get it going a little bit sooner. They took 33s in that first game. It's probably something they're going to do in this game as well, but it's a little bit easier to shoot the ball in your home gym as opposed to that ridiculous atmosphere in Charlottesville, which is arguably, one of the best atmospheres in college basketball. So, the final thing I'll add here is Virginia really needed that first game. If you go back, that was a game where Virginia was coming off a couple of losses,
Yep.
and they desperately needed a win there. Now Virginia's won 9 of 10 since. They're 9-1 in their last 10 games. But man, they haven't looked very good the last 2. They lose to Pitt, really ugly win over the weekend against Wake Forest. So they're not exactly inspiring a ton of confidence right now. VTech's lost 4 of their last 5. So if you want to talk about like, okay, I want to play the home run spot for VTech, I get it. I agree with it. But I wouldn't lay 3.5 here. I think it's a ridiculous number. So Not really sure what you do. That's my big game breakdown. I lean toward Virginia Tech in the matchup, but I think 3.5 is wild. Makes no sense to me that it's 3.5 unless there's some kind of injury that I missed. So that's all I got there. But I guess I lean the matchup pushes me toward Virginia Tech.
Yeah, it's an interesting one here. A game that both teams really, really need. And I do think the home team has actually dominated this series over the last couple of years, too. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get it done here tonight. The Va-Tech at home, lane 3. Or is Virginia and Tony Bennett going to kick it up a notch here, which far be it from them not to. We're used to that, Rob Vino, over the years, too. We're still waiting for Izzo and his teams to kick it up a notch, or maybe it is. Maybe he's there, and here comes March as they look at the calendar. And Bennett, he's another guy too with that Virginia squad that seems to figure it out later. But you got an interesting game here tonight too. It's it's the other Big 12 game on the board. Only 3 top 25 games here tonight, guys, and this being the last one there with Texas taking on K-State, who pretty much back was against the wall a couple of days ago against TCU. It didn't work out all that well for K-State in that one. Not sure it's going to work out all that well for them in this one because you got a pissed off Texas team here, Vino. So what do we do with this Big 12 matchup on a kind of maybe a last hurrah here for K-State? But, man, the argument can be made maybe for Texas as well.
Yeah, so we won't bother with the side, Joe, because we'll talk about the side in a side of the best bet segment. We'll try and talk about total here in this game, but you're right. You look at these two teams and what they've done inside the Big 12 this year, and all the stuff that they've put together. There's really only one fundamental matchup where there's a distinct advantage. It's Texas's 3-point offense against K-State's 3-point defense. Texas has 5 guys in that lineup. That's a lot to guard. They shoot over 35% from 3.
Oh.
And, it's not like they shoot 23s. The lowest guy on that list has shot 57 threes. So it's a lot of 3-pointers. It's a lot of guys who can make them. It's a really good 3-point defense. So you wonder where you're going to get an edge in this particular game. Sometimes you got to dig beyond the statistics. And I feel like there's circumstances here in this game, and I feel like there's a certain seasonal edge here to this one. And I'm going to say that the fatigue factor probably hits Kansas State at this point in time more so than it does Texas. These teams are in their 13th Big 12 game. It's a grind. Every single night in the Big 12 is a grind. 13th game, and the schedule is not favorable here for K-State, right? It's one of those Saturday, Monday with travels. So here they come after a tough TCU game loss, come to Texas. And if you look back at the first 6 games, first of all, the overall statistics defensively for Kansas State look wonderful at this point in time. But you got to separate that into what happened and what's happening right now. First 6 games of the season, KSU held every Big 12 opponent they played to 67 points or less. Really, really good. Last 6 games they played, the only team they held under 72 was Kansas. Kansas got 64 in regulation, and that's what I'm counting here. They wound up getting 70 for the game, but 5 of the last 6, all 72 or better against KSU. It kind of tells you that there's some erosion in that defense, and it makes sense because there's such a small rotation, short rotation, right? They only have like 6 guys that get all of the usage minutes on that team. So 13th game, schedule's not great here. The scheduling spot isn't great. You got a short rotation. All of that, I always feel like that shows up first and foremost on your defensive end. Because defense is where you got to get back in transition. It's where you got to get into a half-court lockdown mindset. And just at this point in the season, maybe K-State is ground down a little bit. The first 6 games of the year, in Big 12 play, they held every single opponent to under 40% from the field. That hasn't happened since. So, again, I feel like Kansas State, their overall defensive statistics are nice. But if you look inside what's going on with them right now, I'm not so sure they're the same defensive team at this point in time. Texas, meanwhile, they've got 8 guys in that rotation that eat up the minutes. So extra guys at home. not off of as tough a game as KSU was because Texas got blown out from start to finish by Houston. So I would say this. I think, if you're Kansas State, what do you do? If you want to conserve energy on defense, a lot of times a coach will go to zone. Head coach Tang is not one to go to zone, but you don't want to zone Texas either. I just mentioned they got 5 guys that can shoot it. So it's a real difficult spot for them to stop Texas from scoring. If I want to get over 140.5 here, which I think is a pretty fair number, you got to get help from Kansas State, Joe. And when you said it didn't turn out well for them on Saturday, it might have been that 1 for 15 shooting from 3 that
You
didn't turn out
think?
real well. And
They're awful.
6.7%, it just doesn't cut it in college basketball, right? So, and it's a team that when you look through, they're the second worst 3-point shooting, or second or third worst shooting team in the Big 12 as far as 3-pointers are concerned, but they average 30%. Texas is the dead last team in stopping 3-pointers from opponents. So if KSU bounces back to even their average of 30%, that's 5 times as many points in this game from 3-point range as they had the other day, which will be helpful here. The other thing about Kansas State, real quick, is they foul an awful lot. I mean, they can't get away without fouling at all. And they're 13th in the conference in free throw rate. Texas doesn't necessarily get to the line, but you probably can get to the line against KSU. And if this game stays within a reasonable margin, 2 of the 4 best free throw shooting teams, Drew alluded to it in his analysis. You want good free throw shooting teams at end game situations. These are 2 of the 4 best in the Big 12. So you can get that. Texas played 12 Big 12 games, 10-2 over this number tonight, 140.5. Pretty good. Rodney Terry plays slow, but they still get into the 140s all the time. KSU, I just think, again, it's a team that's probably a bit fatigued. Spot doesn't help their defense. I think they'll bounce back and score a little bit offensively because Texas, again, I didn't dig too deep into the numbers here with this analysis, but if you go and do it, you'll find out Texas is not a great defensive team. So I think 70-70 or 70 apiece is not that much to ask for here. And it's an 8.5-point game. So you're talking about 74-66. I think KSU finds their way to 70. And if they do, this game goes over fairly easily. So I'm going to put it somewhere in the 143 plus range, Joe. I think this one, because of circumstance and because of time of season, scheduling spot and everything, gets over the total 140.5.
All right, 140.5 going over. I think K-State, they played every game in overtime too, I think, early on in the season. So they have played more overtime games. I mean, at some point, that's got to start to wear on them. I got to love the fact, though, that they lost their best player because he got into a bar fight, right, prior to the season starting, right? Then he transfers to Memphis and completely blows that team up. That team sucks. I don't know what is going on. I mean, you want to talk... Can't be because of talent, because it's the most talented team in the world, but maybe K-State wasn't as crazy as we all thought they were for shipping the kid out, because he is a major issue right now, and it's starting to show there for Memphis. So they'll have to go at it without him, and they're going to do their best here tonight against Texas. Hopefully they'll get it up and over that total there for Vino. All right, so those are the 3 big games, guys, we broke down. We'll have some best bets for you here coming up. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new to us here at WagerTalk.com. We've got more content daily and weekly than anybody when it comes to all the big games and talking about game breakdowns and, of course, more best bets as the week progresses here. But we're going to take it to where everybody loves to go on a Monday. Mississippi Valley State. If you have not heard of Mississippi Valley State, you have no idea what you are missing. Maybe some of the funniest play-by-play. Just look it up on YouTube. Trig made me do this, Drew, back in the beginning of the season, where I actually, because you're not going to find this on any cable network, right? So go to YouTube and watch the 2 play-by-play guys call this game, and it might just be the funniest damn thing I've ever seen in my entire life. They have no idea who's playing. They're ripping people apart left and right. They're making fun of people in the stands. It might actually be some of the funniest things I've ever heard. But you have bet again, you've used their games a bunch here in this spot. You're doing it again tonight against Alabama State. I don't think even Detroit won a game, if I'm not mistaken. Detroit Mercy. Are they winning a game tonight? Is that the way you're thinking, or are you fading them again?
No, Joe, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It has been a moneymaker for me. This money-making train, which is fade Mississippi Valley State, guys. If you haven't jumped on, there's still room for you. So all aboard here as we head to the SWAC Monday night. We're going off the board. We hit one big game. Hey, we're gonna cook one up here in the SWAC. Mississippi Valley State, yes, an entertaining listen. However, they are not very good on the basketball court, Joe. And I know you know this. 0-25 on the season, guys. The only college basketball team out there that has not won a game. They've actually only covered 9 games this season. So the market really still hasn't keeping up with them. They've been a money burner. They've only scored 112 points in each of their last 2 games. So I love kind of fading teams that are having trouble scoring as well. It kind of keeps that, slipping through the back door a little bit shut here. And Alabama State on the other side, they're actually plus money on the season. If you've been betting them every game, you've made money on the Hornets. Also, it's a solid spot play, kind of schedule spot here. They've lost 3 straight games, so there's questions there, but they've stayed at home in this spot, at home in Montgomery. I like them here to cover. I like them in blowout fashion. And one of the big reasons why, guys, rebounding. This is the number 1 rebounding team in the conference, in the SWAC. They are absolutely going to dominate the boards tonight. They're going to have a bunch of more shots here, giving them, minus 15. It's a big number, but it's big for a reason here. They're at home in Montgomery. Give me the Hornets and Alabama State minus the 15 to beat down the Fighting Jerry Rices of Mississippi Valley State and the Delta Devils here. So fade City on Mississippi Valley State, Alabama State minus the 15, Joe.
That non-conference schedule too of theirs, like it's just they got to go collect the money and get their brains beat in early, and then it never gets any better as the season progresses. It's got to be. Could you imagine the morale in that locker room? Has got to be something else here. But as long as they keep throwing them out there, Drew, I'm with you. Might as well keep fading them. There's no point if it ain't broke. Don't fix it. All right. I was hoping you were going to this game here, Trig, as Colgate's a team you know very, very well. If I'm not mistaken, they haven't lost since early January, and the last time they lost, it was against Lafayette, the team they're playing here tonight. So is it payback? Is it not? Or is it too big a number? What are we looking at here in this Colgate?
Yeah, so you saw me looking down at my phone because I basically kind of decided on the fly that this was going to get added. I was going to pass today. I wasn't going to have a client play, but this moving to 9. So you have to understand why too. Like this was 6.5. I thought this opened where it probably was supposed to be 6.5, 7. This got steamed and bet up to 9. So even touched 9.5 some places, really? But we're going to call it 9. That's what it is most places now. And I just disagreed with the move enough where I had to jump in and take the 9 points with Lafayette. So I was considering going to this game, Joe, but this is down near Rob Vino, down in the Philadelphia area where Lafayette is, a little bit probably north of that. This was the Patriot League title game last season. These two teams are 1-2 in the Patriot League this year. And yeah, you alluded to it. Lafayette came into Hamilton, New York, a place that not many teams have won during this sort of Colgate dynasty of sorts. I think they're like something crazy, like 66-5 or something in Hamilton straight up. Their last 70 games here. But Lafayette pulled the upset, 169-64 in the first meeting earlier between these two teams. And yes, you're also right. Colgate hasn't lost since. But this is something I've been saying about this Colgate team all season. This team is not an elite mid-major team. This is not the Colgate teams of the past few years. Their record suggests otherwise because they're 13-1 in Patriot League play. But you have to understand that the Patriot League is way down from where it's been, the past couple of seasons. And so when I just look at this roster, go back to non-conference play. I mean, this Colgate team's a lot worse than the Tucker Richardson, Oliver Lynch Daniels Colgate teams of the past couple years. So I think that steam and where Colgate is getting priced is just very inflated right now because of the 11 straight wins. But the other reason I want to go against Colgate here is because I think they're going to have to go back to their big lineup because Lafayette has some size, and that's the one thing that's helped Colgate in Patriot League play. Matt Langle's been able to get away from playing all of his bigs simultaneously because the Patriot League doesn't have a ton of size until you get to Lafayette, where they play Justin Vanderbilt, who's a 7-foot center, probably like the only traditional center in the league. Kyle Jenkins, 6'7" at the forward position, great player, very versatile player for Lafayette. And they've got a guy in Eric Songberg that's a 6'7" guard. So, I mean, that's some serious size for this conference. And I went back to the first meeting, Joe, and Langle pretty much had to keep Moffitt and Keegan Records on the floor the entire time and play Jeff Woodward, who's kind of like their big plotting center, extended minutes. And it's probably why they lost, because if you go back to early in the season when this was their starting lineup, the defense was worse. They can't move in sort of that manner, that sort of nice no dribble manner that Colgate likes to play, and they've played in years past. And it was costing them earlier in the season. And Coach Langle said, like prior to the season, that that's how he was going to play because those were his best players. And he's moved away from that in conference play, which is likely why they've played better. Obviously, they've also played lesser, inferior competition. But I don't see with his roster how he gets away without playing Moffitt, Woodward, and Records like pretty much the entire game. And I think that puts him in a little bit of a vulnerable position defensively. It makes their paint defense fine, but they're going to give up the three. They were giving up open threes at an alarming rate earlier this season. And it also just, the flow of the team, the defensive rotations just weren't as good. The game I went to see the Colgate play Harvard, and you had Keegan Records just point blank screaming at his teammates because no one was switching. It just doesn't flow as well. And so you're going to give me 9 points with Lafayette at home. Remember, Lafayette's the home team here. They actually have one of the better home atmospheres in this conference. Like I talked about Colgate and like fans not showing up. Lafayette's probably going to have like close to 2,000 people at this game. I think their venue seats like 2,400. This game and the Lehigh game are the two games that those Lafayette fans come out for. And so I think you're going to have a great atmosphere. We've seen Colgate be a little bit not quite as sharp on the road in Patriot League play in recent years. So I just disagreed with this number, moving from 6.5 to 9. And I'm just going to punch back at the market here. I think that's too many points. My handicap says Lafayette, and you're going to throw me an extra 2 points just because the market decided to steam this up to 9. I've got to get involved here. So Lafayette plus 9. I think the Leopards just match up really well with this Colgate team. And at worst, I see a pretty competitive game here. So we'll go Lafayette plus 9. And I added it as a client play, so it's a 4% best bet. Definitely my only one for Monday.
It's a crazy line move there. And now sitting at 9 across the board here, guys. So Colgate taking on Lafayette plus 9. Trig is all over it, taking the value there in this one tonight. That leaves us one more best bet with Rob Vino, who, listen, Vino, if you're going to do it, you might as well go. I believe Southland, if I'm not mistaken, right? We going, I believe Lamar could be taking on Southeast Louisiana. Two teams actually playing pretty good basketball here, especially this season. So what are you going to do here? Are you a little revenge, I believe, on one of these teams' minds from an earlier loss? So what do you do here tonight in this one?
Yeah, and we talked earlier, Joe, about these low major conferences getting ready to get into tournament play. So start to pay attention. So we'll do a little Southland breakdown for everybody watching here. Lamar at Southeastern Louisiana. I mean, aside from McNeese State, right, who is coached by the FBI's most favorite corrupt head coach to wiretap, Will Wade. Other than that, the league has been, there's a huge separation gap, right? McNeese has devoured this league, but these next 4 teams, 3 8-4s and an 8-5 in Southeastern Louisiana. And this is as big a game as any in a conference tonight, right? Game open pick 'em, move to 1.5. Southeast Louisiana, we've got a first game to draw from. First time around, it was 74-64 for the Lamar side. They were 5.5-point favorites. They get the cover in that game. They shot the ball really well. And what that really good shooting did, 48.4% from two, 50% from three. I think they made 11 threes in that game. But what it did was it negated a lot of the huge rebounding edge that Southeastern Louisiana had in that game. 41% of Southeastern Louisiana's offensive shots wound up in second chance points, offensive rebounds and second chances. And so they crushed the boards, but the other team didn't really need the offensive rebound because they were making shots all game long. That game was only 23 days ago, January 27th. And so much has changed since then because at the end of that game, Lamar was 5-2, sitting in the upper echelon of the Southland standings. Southeastern was 2-5, down with the bottom feeders. But since then, they've won 6 straight. And the difference in this team over the last 6 straight has now put them only a half a game out of the number 2 seed. That, like I said, there's a 3-way logjam for second right now. Southeastern sits at 8-5, 1/2 game behind. So big game for both teams. And when you go through their numbers, they're almost mirror images offensively. How about this, Joe? Inside that league, these two teams, number 2 and number 4 in offensive efficiency, number 2 and number 3 in effective field goal percentage, number 2 and number 4 in offensive rebound percentage, number 3 and number 5 in 2-point field goals, number 3 and number 2 in 3-pointers, the 2 best free throw shooting teams in the league. So offensively, they're in the top portion of this conference in almost every major category. Defensively, it's kind of the same until, again, you get to who fouls more than the other guy. And Lamar has been a fouling machine. And Southeastern Louisiana is the second cheapest at putting teams on the line. Lamar, they give up 40.6% free throw rate, which is 12% higher than what Southeastern allows. And it just, in a game like this, where you're talking about pick 'em 1.5, those game-ending free throws could make a difference. And I'll say this, when you're at home in close games and you got the refs, the home whistles generally go your way, could be an advantage for Southeastern Louisiana on the free throw line here. I'd add to that Lamar's road work in this conference hasn't been good. 2-4 straight up and against the spread in league play. Okay, you lose by 8, you lose by 21 to A&M Corpus Christi. They missed the closing number by 4.5 in that game, and they got beat by 21 by McNeese. Everybody gets blown up by McNeese. I think they were getting 11. They lose by 21. But they lost outright to Houston Christian. They lost outright to Incarnate Word. Those two teams are 7-18 straight up in conference this season. So those losses aren't good for Lamar. And you're going to play a hot team here in Southeastern Louisiana. I feel like tempo might play a pretty big role in this game as well. Southeastern, the slowest paced team in the league. And Lamar, their average possession length is the 37th fastest in the nation. So Lamar wants to get up and go. The first time it was only a 63 possession game. So to an extent, Southeastern had it their way. But the 63 possessions is a little bit misleading because Lamar made so many shots. There weren't a ton of possessions. I still think they can slow it down here. Avoid the track meet. This team, Southeastern, just to reference how good they've been over this 6-game winning streak, their field goal percentage for 6 games now combined, 48.4% from the floor. Their 3-point percentage, which they're number 1 in the league right now, 43.9, almost 44% threes over the last 6 games as an average. That's pretty good. So I'm going to take the home team here. It did open pick. It has pushed to 1.5, but less than a bucket with maybe some late fouls on our side. We'll take it. Southeastern Louisiana minus 1.5 in the old revenge mode.
All right, little revenge spot here with 2 teams playing some great basketball. We do have one more best bet for you here from our good friends over at goldsheet.com, and we'd highly encourage you guys to check it out over at goldsheet.com. They got write-ups like this across all the games on the board. Really, really great up-to-date information and analytics, everything you need to know to make it a profitable day on the hardwood over at Gold Sheet. And they're going to take a look, and I know Drew broke this game down when we started the show here from a side perspective. Well, they're going to take a look at the over with Houston and Iowa State. And boy, oh boy, when I said it was getting bet, I didn't realize it was getting bet this crazy. 131.5 right now is what this game is being bet up to. And you'd be hard-pressed to find Iowa State or Houston past games in which you got 3-4 points of steam to a total and the over with these two teams. But that's exactly what you got going on right now. And they're not scared over at Gold Sheet, too. They like the over in this matchup, given the fact that 8 of Iowa State's last 9 games, in fact, would have cleared that opening total of 127.5. And we've already seen this game, and it was a woeful shooting performance by both teams in the first one. Thinking a little positive regression is coming here. Could be a tight game. Overtime's always a possibility, but any which way you cut it, Iowa State, Houston, the market agrees over the total, which right now is up to 131.5. And that will do it here. Light slate of games here. Great slate tomorrow as well. To recap, Southeast Louisiana for Vino tonight for a best bet. Trig is taking them 9 points, guys. He just did it live on air with you. Lafayette +9 against Colgate. Drew says if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there is no fixing Mississippi Valley State. Alabama State laying the 15 for Drew here tonight in that one. And our friends from the Gold Sheet, they will look at the over, and they are not alone in that Iowa State-Houston matchup. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like button, guys. Make plans to come back and join us again tomorrow. Huge slate tomorrow. We will have you covered. And hit the subscribe button for those of you that are joining us here for the first time. Much more when it comes to daily and weekly content on all the big games. We have got you covered here at WagerTalk TV. So on behalf of these guys, best of luck with all your plays here tonight, guys. Come back and join us again tomorrow. We'll do it again. Until then, good luck. Cash those tickets. We'll talk to you again.